Aloha, welcome to the Razor Graduated Bob theory portion. I'm very excited to bring this to you guys because it's my adaptation from a classic. So the Razor Graduated Bob serves as an introduction to shorter hair shapes, demonstrating how to create a bob with a continuous perimeter and a cohesive form despite the density jump in the hairline. Through fundamental razoring techniques, this approach allows stylists to adapt the classic bob shape, achieving either soft, textured edges or precise, defined lines depending on the desired outcome. So I did want to touch base before we get into this. We're getting an introduction into shorter shapes and what defines a bob and what defines a pixie. So here I have an example. This is the beautiful pixie that Tony has cut. And as you can see, the difference between how you would describe a haircut for the bob is its perimeter. So you can see how the perimeter is defined versus the pixie is not as defined and follows the shape of the hairline. So that's where you want to differentiate whether this is a bob or a pixie. Next, I also wanted to share with you guys, that's why FOE or faux is so important, because here are the small differences between the two bobs that I can show you. So here we have, again, I want to point out that our technique saves the line or the perimeter, so it's continuous despite the density jump that happens, right? So again, we'll be utilizing FOE, faux, but as you can see in these haircuts, there's a little slight difference. And that difference is gonna come from the detail of your finger angle. So as you can see, this has a little bit drastic of a finger angle versus this has a little bit lower of a finger angle. But both are razor graduated bobs that respect the perimeter that continue past that hairline, past that density jump. For this haircut, our 5 pillars, gonna start with our density, is gonna be sparse, normal to thick. This is a classic shape. Why it is so famous is because it works with nearly all hair types. For your wave pattern, you can use everything. So textured, curly, wavy, straight. For stick straight hair, which kind of is this mannequin head, you have to consult with your client and make sure that they are able to style it, because it might not be too suitable of a look if you're doing this on straight hair on a person who does not style it daily. Next, for the strand, again, it works on all strands of hair, fine, medium, and thick. For the length, you can start utilizing a lot of the movements and techniques that I'm showing you in this haircut on all lengths, certain pieces, but overall, you do want to keep it within the bob, right? Because when hair does get longer, you're not gonna have too much freedom of where the hair falls. Last, for the growth pattern, you definitely want to pay attention to compensate for jumps in the hairline. So when I say that, you might have to decide where your length is depending on first on that bottom hairline. Sometimes clients have kind of pokey hair that comes out when it's cut too short. You might have to cut shorter in order for it to have a cohesive look. So pay attention to that before you decide your length. Also on the corners of the nape, right, which is the density jump, a lot of times we can have a growth pattern there. It's referred to as a cowlick or the swirl, or in Hawaii we call it the giri giri. But you want to compensate because that's going to affect how cohesive the line is going to travel to the front. And also in the hairlines on the front, you want to see whether or not it might play a role in how the hair moves. And now that we're dealing with shorter hair, because of the cowlick that is present in the crown, what could be happening, and this I see this oftentimes in the salon, is that the hair sways with the swirl. So you might get one side that sits perfectly and the other side that wants to follow that same direction. So understanding that in your client and setting up a realistic expectation to your clients is essential for it to look good and for the client to be comfortable and confident with your haircut. Graduation refers to the result from cutting the hair to create volume that extends above the perimeter length when the hair is allowed to fall naturally. So that's the best definition that we've come up with, and I think that that's a really good one because I can point this out to you. The perimeter is the line or the length of the haircut. The graduation is above that perimeter length and it creates volume. The appearance of graduation will be greater for more textured hair when dry. So knowing that, you have to decide your angle and not expect it to really sit that way as it's dry, especially on textured hair. So I would go with more subtle angles and then start to feel your way. And again, the consultation with your client is essential at this point because of the expectation that could be had. When cutting hair in the nape plane, consider the positioning of the client's head. If they are leaning their head forward, make sure to check the line when their head is in a natural position. We tend to have our clients lean their head forward so we can reach and cut in this nape plane. So don't judge it by that, especially if we have a odd hairline. And I'm a really big example. I'll just show you. I don't have an even hairline, and most people don't. Most people don't have a straight across hairline. So that's going to come into effect on the expectation of your perimeter. So when the client is down, make sure that you also see how it looks when it's up. When cutting in diagonal or vertical panels, make sure you are over your section to see the guide beneath and be on the side that your guide hand thumb points to. So whether it be that, again, I'm using our cradle grip, thumb is pointed this way, I want to position my vision to see my guide and my cut on the thumb side. If I'm coming here, cradle but from underneath, my thumb is on the opposing side, and now I want to position myself and look over the direction that the thumb points to. To avoid a concave or a hollow result when working in vertical panels, elevation should be kept at 90 degrees or below in relation to the nape plane. For each client, there is a desirable cutting angle to achieve graduation. Taking the angle beyond that may result in collapsing the shape and will give you a concave result. Creating panels around a pivotal point of reference gives control to create a continual weight line and shape despite the density jump. For this, you're definitely going to start to put this into play once I show you our hands-on. I'm going to try to show you on the board as well. But again, pivotal points, that's where we really utilize pivoting in this haircut, right? Because it keeps the length and the weight in order to achieve this look. Twisting of the cutting panel will occur when the finger angle is not parallel to the cutting panel due to the round of the head or our manipulation. So an example for that is for a small move that we are going to do, right? Is let's say I have my diagonal panel here. If I manipulate it this way and cut it this way, I'm going to show you with my comb that this is the cutting panel and this is the panel on the head. And you see that it is twisted. So know that that is what we are looking for in this haircut, and that comes because we are pivoting our panels. The inconsistency of the hairline from the nape corner to the top of the ear is what we consider and call the density jump. The density jump reminds us that we will lose the length if elevation and round travel is utilized in combination. So what that means is if we were to keep our elevation the same, and if we keep our finger angle the same, and we travel around the head, the result will be more of a pixie than a bob. Just a note before you get into this haircut, and I definitely want you to pay attention to this, that if our client has a small section for the front, which this mannequin head does not have, but let's say you section off your client and their front is really small, is really tight, you definitely want to keep your cutting of the front isolated in the back. But in the case of this mannequin head, if there is high density in the front, you slightly want to reduce your over direction when you approach the front. When using a razor to cut the hair, the blades should be replaced when they become dull. Dull razors will rip, tear, and stretch the hair rather than cleanly cutting it. Through time, through practice, you are going to develop a sensitivity to how sharp the blade is. Please know for your client and for the result of the haircut, and mainly the outgrowth of the haircut, it is essential that the blade is sharp. What I mean by that, right, and as stated earlier, if the blade is not sharp and you continue to cut hair, what's going to happen, it's going to snag the hair, and we're dealing with wet hair, which is more elastic. It's more going to rip, tear, and stretch that hair. And maybe that's why you've heard from clients that they prefer not to use razor because it leaves split ends, bulbs on their hair. There can be a lot of problems. And please know that sometimes when I'm cutting hair, if this is a really coarse head of hair and it's a high density, I might even use 2 razor blades. Now back to that, how to efficiently use your razor blade. I don't have a razor here just to show you guys, but this is the handle itself. When using the razor, use the whole blade to create a textured line, right? And so how you would do that is we want to make small circles, and in our razor, we're going to consider this our toe and heel, heel to toe. And as you go in, you want to utilize the whole blade. That way you can create texture and also save your blades. For this haircut, it is essential for you to section off your 12 planes. After you've sectioned your 12 planes, in the center nape, you want to start the guide vertically in the center. As you start this guide, this is the most important part of the haircut because it's going to set you up for success or for failure. So please know that even if you've taken your guide and you've made a mistake, I'm going to show you how to recover. So it's not the end of the world. So you want to start in your center nape with your vertical panel. We definitely want to start off with our triangle. This is going to be your first pivot. But before you start your first pivot, we're going to come in here and set up the angle. So here is where you really want to see how the hair acts. We're going to take our guide and cut, and I would definitely tell you to start with a really conservative angle. So you see my fingers, this might be a good conservative angle to start. Then you can start to see how the hair builds up. And then you can always take it 10 to 20 degrees more, and you will see if you have lost the graduation. Right? And what I'm going to share with you is that please move on. Take your next panel after you've got your guide. If you've taken it in and now it's a concave shape, we still have a chance at the next panel. So as you're traveling through from this center, we've started this center in the nape. Now we're going to use this top point, which is right below the occipital. And now we're going to use this point and isolate. And I'm going to show you with my comb. We're going to isolate here. And here are the panels that we'll be taking on the head. So your first step again will be pivoting here. What I would suggest you guys start is always start on your knuckles inside. Knuckles in being that because, again, I've explained this already, that there are restrictions to certain positions as we're cutting hair, right? So the big reason why you would want to start with your knuckles to the client is because this essentially creates a little bit of elevation, right? So why you would want to start on that side is because you want to set up with that elevation. If you had started on your fingers pointing into the client, you have nothing restricting the hair, and now you've set your standard to be at this low elevation that is physically impossible for you to do symmetrically on the other side. So it's setting up your movement and keeping it so that it is actually realistic on both sides. Now you finish your first pivot point. We are going to drop down our parietal section, and now we're going to take our second pivot point to the top of our parietal, center parietal. So Here we've started our first pivot. Now we got our second pivot, and you just want to stop at that nape corner. So again, we haven't cut any of this hair that's out of this triangle. And our first pivot point was at the center top of our nape. Second pivot point is the center top of our parietal. Now, once you've completed this triangle, now we can go ahead and start our second pivot. Your second pivot point is going to be on those nape corners. So I'm just going to show you briefly because we're going to really get in depth with our hands on. So how this pattern is also going to work is that we've started our guide on our knuckle side. We're going to finish this side on the pivot. We're going to do the same and create a same elevation and continue that line on this side. Now that we've finished the right side of your triangle and we've dropped down the rest, our next pivot point is going to be that nape corner. So I do suggest you to continue to the front with your finger side pointing in. And the reason why is because it helps you to set up your pivot. So your first pivot was on a vertical axis. Your second pivot will be on a horizontal axis. So what I mean by that is, I'm just going to show you briefly, I'm going to always be pivoting on that nape corner to the front. And again, like I said before, if there's high density in the front, I will lessen my over direction. If there's not high density, I would stay isolated here and pull everything back to that pivot point. Now we've finished the side that the fingers point in. We're going to continue on the other side and create the same thing. What I've noticed over the years of teaching this haircut is that it's a nice warm-up. You want to set yourself up for what is easy for yourself so that way when you get to the hard side, you've got your rhythm built in. You've got your foundation and the feeling and your positioning built in. So we're going to repeat the same thing on this side with knuckles pointed in. But again, because on this side, you're using your knuckles to point, make sure that your knuckles consistently point at that nape corner. After we've completed this whole nape, parietal, and side connection, we're going to dry the hair. And if you've taken the koi bob already, we're utilizing this extended elevation and this extreme finger angle to create more convex on the top. We're going to elevate right up from where it is and cut at that angle. And lastly, like all of our haircuts, we're going to do our star check to make sure that it is balanced, regardless of how the client wears their hair. So follow along with our hands-on. Thank you. Aloha, my name is Koi. Welcome to the Razor Graduated Bob demonstration. First, we're going to go over our 5 pillars of the haircut. So for density, this haircut is a classic haircut, so it matches all density, all wave patterns, all strands, but for the length, it has to be a bob. In an art education, the bob is determined as having a weight line above the shoulder. And last is our growth pattern comments. For the growth pattern, just compensate for the jumps in the nape hairline. So what you want to do is make sure, depending on the length that you're aiming for the back, that the hairline itself is taking account for any jumps that could happen. A lot of people have cowlicks that could make this hair jump. So you just want to make sure that the length that you take can cover that jump and movement in the hairline. Okay? So that's just what you have to consider when you're deciding if this suits the client. So here you can see as this model, she's pretty ideal. I would say you want to watch out for stick straight hair. And when I say that, you just have to make sure that your client styles their hair. Or just like this model, this is kind of on the edge of what would be suitable, is that this model has kind of stick straight hair. Doesn't really have too much bends in it, and it's coarse, right? So again, we want to make sure that the client has a little bit of bends in their hair, and if not, that they're willing to style it, right? So let's get right into it and get my model washed. My model is now washed. Same concept I want to share with you guys. Fortify the hair before putting tension, especially wet. Tangle. Just on a side note, if you're starting and you're doing a big chop and starting with longer lengths, it's much easier to get it closer to the length you want and start to shape. As you can see, this is kind of a shorter shape already, so it's kind of presetting me. But if you're going to try to handle a lot of length and go short, I would just chop it straight first. That way, you're closer to your target. So before we start, I just wanted to make sure a little bit of review of our theory that we talked about. When we talk about razors, you must use a new razor. I would say you have to switch your blade, and it has to be a fresh blade for each haircut. Or else, if it's not sharp enough and it doesn't just cut the hair, what's going to happen is you're going to start shredding the hair because the blade will start to snag, pull, and snap the hair. And the last thing I'm going to review for you guys is it is the heel and the toe, and each cutting panel that I take will be running through and utilizing the whole blade so that we can be efficient and utilize all of this disposable blade. So first step we're going to do is create our 12 planes. For the 12 planes on this, after sectioning your left and your right, section off the crown in combination with the top and the front, all in one. The next section is your side, and your final section is your parietal, right onto that bottom of that occipital, and then repeat on the other side. You do want to check when you do that crown combination section that you are symmetrical. So before I continue, just wanted to share with you guys what it should look like. We have our nape plane, parietal planes, our side planes. Make sure that it's symmetrical on both sides. And finally, the combination of our crown, top, and front in one. So let's get started. The first concept I want to share with you guys, we're going to be doing two things that are really crucial. So first is we are going to pivot. So the first pivot we're going to be doing is a vertical pivot. So imagine a wall clock, right? So our first pivoting is going to, again, be vertical. So we're going to be pivoting this way. The second pivot we are doing is going to be a horizontal pivot, which is parallel to the ground. So this type of pivot. And the reason why is because we define our bobs as a continuous weight line going through. Depending on the client wants, of course, sometimes the weight line might be above the hairline, but still, it's a continuous line of weight that comes through. So because today, what we're going to do is a bob that is lower than the hairline, what we have to consider is what we call the density jump, right? So we have our nape corner here, and once we reach this corner, if we were to continue the same elevation, you would then create what we would call a hole. So we have to put that into consideration, and that's what I'm sharing with you guys today. Step 2, in the center nape, start the guide vertically with your hand, knuckles pointed toward the head. The reason for this is because our knuckles will inherently be in the way. So if you start on the side that your fingers point in, you're setting yourself up for the risk of failure because it is hard to replicate less elevation on this side because again, your fingers are pointed in, right? Less elevation. There's nothing stopping me from being on the client's neck. Whereas if I were to come in with my knuckles, I have this whole chunk of my hand that needs to get in there and do the work. So I always suggest, whether you're left-handed or right-handed, to always start where the knuckles point to the head. So for me, it's going to be left first. So I'm going to go with my guide first. So here I'm going to start with my center cutting panel. Now that I have the panel in control, I like to control my panels first by pinching them. And now because I have control with my guide hand, I'll reach in, scoop, come out. Now I'm going to decide where I want my length, right? This is not going to be the final length because we are going to detail, but you want to get it as close as possible to what your client or you desire. So I'm going to come in here. What you want to start, depending on the desired graduation, start with 90 degrees elevated, right? So we're 90 degrees out of our section, and you want to elevate perpendicular to the head, and you want to create your first graduation. So depending on the desired graduation and dispersal of weight, gradually increase by 10 to 20 degrees after you've made your first cut. So just to be safe, I might make my first cut maybe 20 degrees off of parallel to the ground. Okay, now watch, I'm going to insert my razor. Now we're going to use this motion from heel to toe. And also, when you go with the razor, you're trying to create texture. So you want to get your rolling motion down. The more your stroke is, the more texture you'll receive. So watch this. I'm going to come, right? And I'm going to cut my line parallel to my finger. I'm going to come in from heel to toe. Remember, now we're cutting precision. So this is my cut zone. I'm even going to play it more safe and not cut past my cut zone. I'm going to roll my section and adjust my hand. So now I'm in that cut zone again. Okay? So heel to toe. Adjust again. Look at my line. Am I continuing this? Right? Heel, toe. Inherently in the beginning, you might want to get carried away and just really use power. But it's not about power. It's letting the blade talk to you and tell you how sharp it is. Now my next guide, right? I'm going to start to pivot. I talked about pivot. My first pivot is going to be from this center back to that nape corner, and you stop. You isolate. Okay? So here you go. Next one, as you can see, and I'm cutting it 90 degrees out, parallel. So I'm going to get kind of a tilt pivot, right? I'm going to come in and you see my guide. What I like to do to help myself is I like to lay and I'm not sticking the middle finger on purpose, all right? But I like to make sure that my hand is in position to receive that hair. And I'm trying to keep my fingers parallel to my sectioning and heel to toe. And comb, and I'm gonna roll my hands, get that hair, right? I love rolling my hands, especially in these short haircuts, because you've isolated your body, you know exactly where you are, and that way you can keep consistent. So here we are now at that nape corner. This cut panel here is right on that nape corner. So I'm gonna make sure that my knuckles stay parallel with that nape corner. And again, I'm gonna show you guys, you see that I've tilted and pivoted my section. So now it's gonna look more like this, right? I'm gonna come out. And again, I'm paying respects to my sectioning, but also where the hair lives. Here it is. You can see my hand is a little bit tilted because we're pivoting. It is kind of like a 3D pivot. Here you go. You see my guide that's clear. This is why there's a big benefit and why I am telling you guys to start with the razor first, because I want you to get used to your mechanics first. If we are judging ourselves upon a precision line cut and we haven't learned the technique, I think it's kind of setting you up for standards that aren't really helping you and helping you learn that I've learned this or certain achievements along the way. So that's why I promote to use the razor for this cut, because the technical aspect of this has so many facets. So learn that first, and then you can go in and apply with your scissors in the future. So here we are. We finished the left side, and I'm going to leave this alone for now. Okay? So I'm going to leave the left side of my A pivot first. Now I'm going to come on this side, and it's good that you guys have this angle because you can see the other side of it. Here I've made and started my pivot. I'm going to come in, and I like to do this. What will happen in real life is, because there's a shoulder, what you guys can do is have your client turn their head, but maybe just don't have them manipulate so much that it starts to contort that skin and that neck base. Okay? Just a slight turn so that your arm is no longer where their shoulder is. So here, what I like to do is I like to stick my middle finger in just so I'm controlling this hair. If you guys want to use a clip, it's totally up to you guys as well. Now come in, right? I have my middle finger using a base. I'm going to control that hair. I'm going to make sure that I'm fully 90 degrees out with the hair. And what am I going to do? Heel, toe. Okay, out of my cut zone, get that cut zone. This one is going to be toe to heel. I'm reaching in. Before I continue, I want to make sure that I cross-check. So I'm going to lift my section. And I see that the center is actually a little bit longer now. So what am I going to do is I'm just going to grab all of that hair, and don't get yourself so frustrated over this that it's perfect. Because oftentimes when we're looking for mistakes, we are going to find mistakes. And that's not necessarily true that it even is a mistake. So let's do this. I'm going to first cross-check. And you see this bottom is not too bad, not too bad. It's just this top. So now I can isolate this hair. Where does this hair live? Here. Now I'm going to come back and look at that. I found why it is just a little bit longer. It's just ever so slight, right? So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to correct it the same way that I cut it the first time. And you see that? Now it really comes out. if I hold it in my hand. Do you see? Now, this is why a guarded razor has its benefit. A lot of times people like to play with open-ended razors, but it's really hard to make minute changes like that, like a millimeter of a difference. You're going to be cutting yourself. So I do suggest you have a guarded razor, because when we come in here, so you see that sticking out, right? So we're just going to go in there, and then because I have a guarded razor, I can get really close and still be able to use it tomorrow. Okay, so here we are. Let's do the cross check again, and now we look like we're a little more symmetrical. Okay, so it was about 3 panels on the other side. This side will be the same, just 3. Look at me reach that nape corner, and I'm gonna stop. Come in here again. Again, I like to isolate the hair that I'm not working with my middle finger or whatever it may be, right? I do know that in this side, I always kind of have to stick the comb in there along with their neck. And that's why I think my method is good, because I am caring about the body and your client and yourself as well. Once you've got the teeth of the comb into that panel, then you can just focus on combing it and cutting. Okay, you see my guide in here. Now I'm gonna come. Either way, it's your choice whether you want to go heel to toe or toe to heel. So this time I'll just show you toe to heel again. I need control. It's going to be in the center of my cut zone now. Heel to toe. So there you have it. Now we have our first section. I'm not judging my haircut on the line yet. We have to finish the whole thing. So don't judge your work by what has been happening or what looks like the perimeter. What you want to do is lift this up and see, is your movement continuous? It is. And for example, what's happening? I want you to know that this happens in real life, and I want to make sure that you guys understand what could go wrong and how to solve them as well. So for my next panel, what I have to do is over direct it just a little bit to compensate for that short little jump. Now we're going to be on step 6. It's kind of a stairwell that we're going, because we started on the left, went to the right, but because we're in this position already, now we're going to release down the parietal. What I would say is, let's just stay on the right. We are positioned to start cutting that right side already. Now this is where the same thing that we did with the nape is now going to extend up to the center of the parietal, and we're going to create our A, and we're going to pivot this vertically here. I'm going to continue what I did in the nape. I'm just going to do it with a wider section. Now that I have a guide underneath, it's going to just make it easier for me. Here you go. You can see the guide. This is the first center guide section, so the guide will be underneath here, and I'm going to extend that line up. Okay? So first, I'm going to make sure, am I standing 90? Am I standing straight out of the head? Here I am. I'm going to use my cut zone. I'm going to clamp that down. Okay? And this time, I'm going to use heel to toe. Again, I do like to keep combing that hair, and I roll it so that I can see that the extension of the line is going how I want it to. So you see that extension of the line in the cut zone, right? Heel to toe. Here you go. You can already start to see that the graduation is being built up, right? Next move, I'm going to again pivot from that top, middle, bottom of the crown, pivot. Okay, so I'm going to still focus on my right side. Again, we are already here. We're in this position. We're ready to grip the hair. So here it is, again, 90. And what I want you guys to see, remember again, is I want to make sure that I'm allowing the hair to be what it wants. So I'm 90 out straight. I want to check my guide. Now I'm going to have 2 guides, right? One that's right underneath of it and one on the side of it. Now I have insurance. I have 2 guides going for me. Roll my hands. Okay, make sure this out. Again, graduation is going. Same as the bottom, it's probably only going to be 3. And here you go. At this point, if you would like to, just as a reference, maybe you can clip it now. I am using the finer side of my teeth because I do want quite a bit of tension, but I want you guys to notice that I'm not going with straight tension and pulling on that hair. I am letting it show me where it wants to go, but guiding it at the same time, and I'm clamping it at the end. Okay, so here it is. You see my guide, you see the line, right? Heel, toe, out of my cut zone. Roll the hands, right? There you go. It's in my cut zone again. Only gonna cut what I can. Another time, check that out. There's a guide behind, guide on the side. I cannot fail, right? Here you go. And that final piece, I don't care if it's just a little bit of hair. I do not have the right amount of tension. I do not want to continue. I'm just going to go back and make sure there's these little hairs that I'm doing. I still roll it. Okay? And I'm still doing toe first. So here it is. This is on the right side. Now we're going to go back and do the same on the left side. In the next section, I'm pivoting over. Is it necessary to take thin sections? I would advise against being so thin. The reason why we're using our razor is because we're putting texture. Texture is created from hills and valleys and varying lengths. So when you take it too thin, what could happen is you're cutting all that hair and you think you're giving it texture, but because it's thin, all of that hair will then actually build up too much. Okay? So next one, coming through. And it doesn't look like I have that much hair to cut here. Heel to toe. So one more. And here's where I would clip this hair as well. Clip this out of the way. So I want to show you guys, look at the sectioning. Still diagonal, right? I am kind of over directing it back, just ever so slight. But here's the guide. Watch out that your first swipe, you don't take it too in, right? I'd like to line the blade with what I'm doing. Cut zone, roll my hands. Cut zone, roll my hands. I like to take my time, put that intentional texture so that it saves me in the later on with the haircut as far as detail, because it's already soft. So here we are. Once in a while, I do encourage you to kind of push back at this hair to encourage the bevel to see if it's the shape that you like and it complements your client. Okay, so here we are. We're done with step 6. Now here's the next concept that I've talked about earlier, pivoting horizontally. So the next pivot point that we'll be using is the nape corner. Okay, so imagine this. This is how we're going to start pivoting, and we're going to base our pivot off of this nape corner. So again, because I'm already on this side, I'm just going to continue on this side to the front. And here is when you would drop this clip off, and now you can drop your side section, and here you have it. So this is a little bit where you have to move your body, because we've been cutting in this position of the client, meaning the back, and we have to pivot and look at my grip. This is the knuckle side in. I cannot see what I'm doing. So you're either going to do two things. You are going to take a big step to the left of your client, or you can have your client turn. Either way. But you need to be like a whole step further to the left around the client in order to be in the correct position to set your hand up. Okay, here we are. Next one, I'm going to take it diagonal just like how I did the previous section. And for visual purposes, I'm just going to clip this so you guys can clearly see. Now here is where I don't want to lose you guys, so please follow along. Okay, what we're going to do now, okay, I'm going to show you with my comb. If our pivot, and what is important is that nape corner, do you see how my combing comes into play, right? You see that? And look. So now I'm just going to place my hand there to control that hair and to guide it into that section. And you see right there, I have my guide. So maybe first we'll do this bottom section first, just so we can continue it up the cutting panel. So watch as I'm doing. Your knuckles and your fingers are what point the line of the hair to cut. So here you go. And I'm going to rest my knuckle on that nape corner. I'm going to point it right into the person's head. And see, this is where your standing position in relation to your client is extremely important, because I wouldn't be able to do it here, but I definitely can when I'm open and my body is comfortable. So here I'm going to let it slide a little bit past my guide. You can kind of see that guide right there, right? Okay, so I'm going to go from heel to toe, and you can see that hair right there. So I'm literally just going to connect it. Again, roll my hands. That's not enough grip for me, not enough control. Here you go. And here you go. Now I'm going to continue this. Kind of roll my hands. I kind of kept it there isolated. And that's my guide. Look at my hand. The knuckle. If you guys ever need a reference, you place the comb where your hand is and look at where it's pointing. At that nape corner. Okay? And you see the texture that I'm creating? I really highly advise you just putting that razor down and shoving it into the hair. That defeats the purpose of a razor. I mean, it is up to you on how you use your tools, But what I'm looking for is a little bit of texture. As you can see, if I were to comb this hair, do you see a nice and soft line? Now we're gonna go next section. Again, I'm not asking for super thin sections, but if you still need a little bit more warming up to make sure that you're good, I would. And again, the easiest way is I like to lay my hand where I need it to be, and then I comb that hair to that. And there you see my guide. You can kind of see that. You see all of that behind that. That's my guide. So what's going to start to happen is, I want to show you guys this, that my guide is gonna start to curve. Okay, it's gonna be ever so minute, but it's gonna start to curve. I'm gonna take a thinner section so I can show you guys, but watch. You see how my guide has a little bit of curvature. What I want you guys to know is when this happens, you should follow the longest center guide. The head is curved, remember that. Just because we cut a line, we're manipulating it into the line. But once we let go of that, the hair itself will follow the shape of the head with a little bit of curvature. So what I'm saying is, if you cut that short part right outside the borders, you're gonna cut into the center, and that's gonna give you a different result. So use your judgment, and I'm gonna show you right here, right? I'm gonna come in, again, look at my knuckle, it's pointed right at that nape corner, and look. That middle center is a little bit longer. So now I'm going to cut my line. I'm going to show you with my razor. I'm going to cut this line. I'm not going to cut that line and cut off that center. I'm going to use that longest length in the middle to plot. And you see my elevation. I have my graduation. Right? So here you go. And as you guys can see, look at the graduation. But what I want you guys to notice is we're almost where the ear is. And have we lost length? No. That is why you have to respect the 2 pivot points for this haircut. The first pivot point, vertical. Second pivot point, horizontal. Now, it's just a straight shot to the front, but please pay attention to your client's hair and hairline. So what I mean is, once you reach about this ear, you have to pay attention, because sometimes people don't have too much of a side section. If it's only like an inch, and sometimes this is very possible. If this person only has a hairline, maybe even just really short here, right? What you're gonna need to do is really isolate everything back to where that nape is. If someone has a far stretching hairline, just like this mannequin head, we are gonna kind of give up a little bit of our over direction on each panel. That way we can travel the length. Otherwise, it will just go too short to too long. Again, look, I'm almost at her ear. But where am I going? I'm over directing her to that nape corner. Okay? I'm going past and I'm looking for that curvature, the longest point, and creating my line around that guide. Just continue to the front and remember what I'm talking about. If there is a lot of density, right, which she has, watch. Previously, I was right on the nape hairline. I'm going to move a smidge bit right and give up my over direction so that I can have that line continue through, but I'm going to respect how much density she has. Okay, so look, that's that center part right there. The 2 guides from the side are already lost in my cut zone because it's shorter. Come down and I'm going to continue my line. Look, again, my knuckles are pointed a little bit past that nape hairline, nape corner. There you go. And again, I just wanted to share with you guys, we haven't cleaned up yet, but the length is still continuous. While I still have my graduation, and my graduation is still continuing to the front. Now we have about 2 panels left, depending on how detailed you want to make your haircut, right? And again, watch, it's just gonna continuously happen, right? The guide itself is going to be curved. So you see that curve? Again, it's going to continuously happen, but we have to respect the longest length in the center. Okay, so here we go. Again, even if I'm kind of loose, if I drop my comb where my knuckles are pointing, it's only slightly past my previous section. So there you go. That's my guide. And I want you guys to notice that I'm not the one moving because my client is moving. So in real life, it's either I'm moving or my client is moving. It's gotta be. So here it is. And again, I have to give her a little bit of a spin, just a little bit, just a turn. And here we are in our final section. Just because this is our first guide, I like to leave a little bit of safety precautions in my haircut. So I'm just gonna kind of loosely cut this. Okay, I'm gonna kind of leave it a little bit longer. I don't want to set myself up for failure in case the other side doesn't work out. And it's life. We all go through life. We are practicing to be the best we can, but things happen and we can't be so hard on ourselves on it, okay? So here it is. You can see that I'm going kind of longer with this. But again, no matter what, my knuckles are pointed in. I'm creating graduation. There's a slight elevation in how I'm holding the hair, but there you go. Okay, there's that last bit right there that I need to cut. There you go. So I'm just gonna leave this, and yes, right now it kind of looks like that, but don't worry because this is our safety net. And depending on what happens on the right side, I can now correct this side to balance and symmetry. So we're gonna switch sides now. Now we're gonna let down, again, our parietal and our side plane. I do suggest you keep the hair equally saturated, equally moist through the haircut. Look at this graduation already, right? So same thing, diagonal. Now we're past that nape corner. This looks like kind of a lot of hair, so I'm just gonna dial it back just a little bit. So other side, we used our knuckles to point in. This side, we're gonna use our fingers to point in. Make sure we are pointing at the nape corner. And when I say that, doesn't mean that if my finger is here, yes, it's the nape corner, but my comb is actually pointed to the front. So here we are, let's get this in. There you go, there's my guide. But you see my positioning is not correct yet. I need a little bit more room towards her front, right? So again, I'm gonna set my hand up. I'm gonna make sure I elevate and create the graduation, and my fingers are pointed right at the nape corner, okay? And just because this side is a little bit harder, I'm gonna go from the center. Okay? I'm gonna do the same on the other side. Now I'm gonna go from that bottom. I'm gonna use that as a guide to continue up. So watch out now because it could be going shorter. I want to extend the line. I'm not trying to follow the guide underneath of it. Here you go. Make sure, really check any stray hairs. Make sure that's good. And before we go on, I also want to check the symmetry so that I can continue with good work. And it seems like this side is a little bit longer, which is good for me. Okay. So I'm going to go back and just now I'm going to adjust. It's always easier to cut hair than to put it back on the head, obviously. So I'm going to come back. There you go. And see that end right there? I left that longer. There you go. That's a slight adjustment. Redo the check visually. Make sure we're pretty okay. We're spot on. There's a little bit of ish right here. Know that when you're dealing with an actual client, their hairline is going to reflect on this haircut. So I'm just going to do a slight adjustment again just to make sure that I'm on point. Look at where I am in position. I'm comfortable. My arms are just slightly extended, and there you go. There's that piece right there. Just want to make sure. Look at where my fingers pointed, right at that nape hairline. These are like some stringy hairs. Just get rid of that. Now we can continue to the front. I'm going to take diagonal forward. Okay. Again, I'm just setting my hands up. Fingers pointed in. Slight elevation and graduation. And there's my guide. That's that longest piece right there. I'm going to use my razor blade because it is also really straight as a reference of where my line is going to go, how it's going to continue. So again, I'm going to point it right into the head, right there. As you guys kind of notice, I'm doing a little bit of a fan because I need a grip as I'm putting it through the razor at that last moment. And that's why I actually make my cut zone a little bit smaller in this haircut, just because I need to have control. And you don't want to cut something where it's here because you're definitely going to potentially cut this shorter, and you don't want to continue something that's shorter. Obviously, too, because you've worked so hard on that left side, you don't want to make a mistake. The only way to correct it is to recut the whole haircut. Okay, so next thing, again, you see her slightly move, and I gotta be in the right position. And again, I'm right over her ear now, and there is that guide. You're gonna see it. And see if this was in real life, her shoulder is in the way. So in this case, instead, I might have her turn her head that way. Now their chest is open for me. So again, if in a real person, their shoulder is definitely going to be in the way, you can just have them turn their head just a slight bit, opens it up, so you're working on their chest. Okay, again, keep my hand here, isolated, roll it, drop it down. You see that guide? Look at my razor. It's going to be straight, and there you go. You see that graduation coming in, diagonal forward. And again, I always tell you guys, don't worry about these paper thin sections. Not a benefit to you. You see that guide right there. Oh yeah, perfect. Pointing right there. I'm just loosely. Why is it that I can do this? Is because my blade is sharp. If need be, depending on the client, the density, the strand of hair, you might have to switch your blade in the middle. And that is totally better because you don't want the end of your haircut to be all dull and snagged and that hair to be snapping off. Okay? Clean razor, clean haircut. There you go. I got these little things. Get rid of them. Easy to deal with after. But look at that intentional texture that I've already put into her hair before I even detailed her haircut. I have about 2 panels left. Diagonal forward again. Don't need a clip necessarily anymore. And same with the other side, right? I started with my fingers right on the nape. Last one I moved a little bit. I over directed a little bit less on this one. So here you go. Ooh, this is a lot of hair that I'm handling. So maybe I just want to cut this down a little bit. So it's always about the purpose, right? Like, why would you take a thin section? Maybe because you want control over your hair. That is totally fine. Is it necessary? If it is for you, then it is necessary. I want you to see what I just did. Even if it was a big chunk of hair and it was hard for me, I'm not just going to go in there. I'm going to take my time and create the texture. So this is about the end of the dullness of this razor as well. Lucky thing, this is my last panel. Again, my hand was over here, pointing in, slight elevation for the graduation. I'm going to go heel to toe, and then last toe to heel. So it's kind of similar on the other side. See, I left this little bit right here because I over directed it kind of drastically to the back. Let's check the symmetrical balance. Ahaha, look at what I've done. So this is my safety net on the graduated bob. Now here, because now I'm on to the detailing, instead of over directing a lot on that last section, maybe I'll just do it and I'll reduce the over direction for that front. Do I reduce the elevation? Do I reduce the graduation? No. I just simply reduce the over direction. Use these little hairs, pull it past, and there you go. I'm actually really liking her shape, so I'm going to emulate it on the other side. If you need to, I can just go in there because it's been graduated and slightly just make some detail. But I would like to leave that for the dry portion coming up right next. See, it's pretty symmetrical on both sides, right? So again, the same as I did on the other side. I'm going to begin to reduce the over direction on that last panel. So I'm going to almost kind of sit it right underneath her ear. I'm going to come in. Now I'm going to start cutting it too. You can kind of see that it went a little bit longer than the previous guide. And again, that's just a safety net, right? Also because depending on the density of that final hairline, you're going to want to do that because some people don't have enough density. Here's where that guarded razor helps, right? This is just a millimeter of a difference. But because it's guarded, I can just go right up to my knuckles and nothing's gonna happen to my hand. So here you go. I finished this side as well. You guys can see that shape right there, and it's totally fine to leave that. I would even tell you to leave that because we're gonna finish our portion dry. So now I'm just gonna dry the hair and show you the rest. Now we've got the hair dried. Now we're gonna do our detailing portion after we've finished the crown. So we're still not going to touch the perimeter just yet. Here we're going to use a move that we similarly did in the koi bob, okay? So this is gonna be your final move. And let's start off in the back first, the center back. We're gonna do, okay? So you want to really exaggerate your elevation in this, okay? So although I'm combing out, I'm getting it ready. And you see that my guide for my last cut is right here. So I'm gonna pull this up. What you wanna do is really get close, clean this hair up. Get your hand pretty close to the head. And all we're gonna do is pull it directly up. And you see that's my guide right here. So I'm just going to slide and cut as I'm pulling it up. Not much to cut on this one. I'm just gonna travel around the head. The whole head is going to show me what I should cut. So again, comb in, clean the section. Maybe this one's kind of big. Just gonna take this down. So comb in, make sure that your section is clean. Get my fingers in, knuckles out. What I'm going to do is I'm going to pull it up to the sky. That's it. And now I have my guide in my hand. I have it clamped, so it's okay. I just want to make sure it's clean, so I'm going to come up again. Again, clamp it and pull up. Once you have that guide right there, I'm going to come in. Okay, these are my dry slide scissors. And there you go. I'm going to do this all around the head. Again, moving around the client, or the client moves for you. And 90 degrees right out of the head. Pull this close to the scalp. Pull it straight up, and there you go. There's my guide. Come in and slide. There you go. Next one, just pivoting all the way around till we reach the ear. And we're just going to continue our sections up. Same thing. Fingers in, pull straight up. If you want to do a little bit of an out angle, it's a little bit safe. You see how this angle is kind of going out. Okay. Next one, now that we've reached the front, we're just going to kind of take parallel panels, 90 degrees from where it lives. Fingers are close to the head. Pull it straight up until I see my guide. I'm going to take a little bit of an out angle just to be safe. After I finish correcting, I can adjust that. Here you go. Now here's my last section. I'm going to be right on that section. Okay, pull all the way. If you want, you can over direct just a slight bit back to the back of that panel. And pull it straight up. And I have a guide. I also have a guide underneath, guide behind. Remember I talked about leaving that front, but that can be detailed totally at the end. I want to go this side. Same with what I've talked about in previous haircuts. Because we need to have this position of knuckles out, I'm just going to stay here. I'm going to rotate her because I need my hands in that position in correlation with that panel. Pull this up. It's only a smidge bit here. Slide it. Pivoting because I'm still in the back. My panel, make sure it's clean. Now I'm going to move myself. My fingers closed, just pull straight up. There you go. And cut that up. Okay, pivot here. Okay, come here, pull up. Okay, that's the guide right there. I want to make sure I continue that. Okay, now I'm landing right over her ear. Make sure I'm going to move her. Even if this was a person, I would be standing next to them. I'm not really in their lap yet. Okay, come on. There you go. Again, that's my guide right there. I'm going to slide. I like to use my finger and pivot the shear a little bit out to get that angle. If you're comfortable, you can go straight parallel with your fingers, but if you want to play it a little bit safe for detailing later, go a little bit out. And now I'm straight on top of the ear. Same thing. Pull it up. Okay, you can see that guide, right? I'm going to come in, follow that guide. Last section, I'm going to over direct it to the back of that panel. Again, close to the head, pull it straight up. That's that guide. Not bad. This is before I do my detail work, all in the shape and the movement that we've chosen. So it's up to you, your tool of choice, and what is the result that you're looking for. I'm not necessarily looking for a super straight laser line because the hair itself is nice and soft and textured. So it just sits how I want it to sit, right? And that's what's important to me and most likely my client. When you create really precise lines, the client has to style their hair, or if their hair is naturally falling like that, really easy. But here we're just gonna put in our little detail. Okay, maybe I'll switch back to my wet shear for precise. Okay. Now when we look at this, maybe I want to take this line off because there's not too much weight here. So maybe I'll do that. I'll connect this from here to here. And I like to use point cutting. And I like to make a rough cut first just to make sure this is what I want. And it's not what I want. I want it a little bit higher. All right, this is better for me. So see, even when we put point cutting and comb, it's still going to be soft. Let's do a visual check. Nice. So here's where I will tell you, and if you guys are seeing this already, I have a little bit of a gap right here. This is real. It's real life. Don't get yourself so situated about it. Don't kill yourself. You can always do it better the next time. But what is important is if this does happen, you make it seamless, that you make it flow into itself. Now the last part about this as well, look at how we're going to handle the front. This will be your choice, user choice and or client. I like to ask my client if they like it first, then I would leave it and or detail it. But let's do this symmetry check in the front to see how I was on my technical application. And Dan da dan! That is super a win for me. It doesn't matter how many years of cutting. When I see that even symmetry, it's a huge win for me. It makes me feel confident. And now I'm detailing it. Okay. So depending on what the client wants. So in this case, maybe I'm just gonna adjust it a little bit, right? So what I'm gonna do is I'm not gonna try to manipulate her hair too much. I'm just gonna soften this and accentuate that. So I want that end line. I'm just gonna soften that weight just a bit. And there you go. Now she flows. Let's go on the other side. This is a really funny thing that I'll share with you guys. Usually the left side for a right-handed cutter is the one that we make the mistake. But this is on video, so it'll be forever ingrained that I did the left side. Awesome. I mean, I'm not saying, both sides are awesome, but you can see how perfect this left side is. So again, you just want to make sure that you blend this in, okay? And now on this side, the same thing. I get my comb in there, slightly lift, make sure that I texturize what I need as far as detail, and there she goes. So this hair just flows how I want it on her behalf. She got her bangs cut. We were playing and I grabbed this head, so she has some bangs. But either way, this is our razor graduated bob. Just as a update, it was her hair. It wasn't my cut. When you really do it, it is a continuous line. So, just trying to regain my honor. But yeah, just know that's what I'm telling you guys. Once again, it is up to the visual and how the client feels and how the hair flows. Okay? I hope you enjoy this haircut. And again, stay tuned for more. If you're interested, we have everypieceatelier.com. Please check out all of our education. And I would love it if you would join us. Mahalo.